But we have this big long overhang, because the upstairs doesn't go as far out as the downstairs.
Due to the weather, we do not yet have a quorum, so I'm going to hold on the approval of the January 8th, 2015 School Building Committee meeting minutes. If we do get a quorum throughout the evening, we can go back and take action on those minutes once the quorum appears. I'll turn it over to Mary for an MSBA update.
Last Tuesday, right on schedule, we submitted the design development submission to MSBA. It included documentation that we further advanced since the schematic design submittal. Also included updated or advanced plans and specifications. There were quite a number of advancements with those documents based on meetings with user groups, with the school department and the high school, middle school, and pre-K. Additionally included a verification and reconciliation on the cost estimate and budget, and we were able through value engineering to meet the projected budget for the construction costs. So we are still tracking to budget and we are tracking to schedule. At this point we will move forward with construction documents with our 60% CD documents forecasted to be submitted in April of this year. The phase will also include the initiation of local permitting with environmental groups such as planning, zoning, and conservation commission. So at this point we have the documents into MSBA. They did send us a verification that the documents were complete on a cursory review, and their review team is now looking at the documents and hopefully will be getting back to us in the next week to 2 weeks to give us their responses for the documents, or their review comments for the documents.
Thank you, Mary. Troy, we'll ask you to provide us a design update, please.
Over the last 4 to 6 weeks, the working group has spent many hours reviewing, looking at in detail the site plan, the safe circulation, the entry drive, the synthetic fields, the tennis courts versus parking, the access to Riley Field, all the detail involved with completing a buildable and a legitimate site plan. And Carrie Orsi from PAR Engineering is here tonight, and we'll ask her to go through and give you an overview. It would take hours to go through all the detail, but we're just going to give you a snapshot of some of the discussions that took place over the course of those many weeks, and some of the resolutions that the committee, the subcommittee made. So Carrie is here. We'll go through some of those primary topics. She'll also talk through the next several months and an overview of the permitting process and the steps involved in what we're planning in the next few months as well for that. Mary also mentioned, just as before I step down, the DD, 100% DD submission. We do have the drawings and specifications here if anybody wants to take a look at them. It's about 350 drawings with detailed specifications. A very comprehensive set of DD drawings that the team, the entire team, put together. So I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so what you're looking at here is a full overview of the site plan. I'm going to kind of zoom into the front of the site and then the back of the site, but first I wanted to give you a full overview and kind of highlight some of the areas that have been discussed, as Troy mentioned. So the areas in the front of the school here, the high school entry and bus entry, as well as the middle school entry here, we looked at making enhancements to the circulation and the parking in those areas. We also looked at some of the striping improvements up here, as well as some modifications and review of the tennis court situation at the back of the building, as well as Troy mentioned, really focusing in on the synthetic turf and the usability of that area and the features associated with the turf field, and just some modifications and enhancements to both the high school drop-off as well as some small shifts in the parking lot and the natural turf field, to just refine and fine-tune those dimensions for the synthetic turf field. So kind of zooming into the front of the school here, you can see the front of the school is outlined here and Glenowitz is down here. Just a more zoomed in area of the site plan. The first area that we can talk about is the parking and the access for the high school. Through conversations with the working group and kind of review of the site circulation, we've revised this entry to kind of come straight into the site. Before, if you remember, it kind of came in and twisted through the parking. So everybody kind of felt with their input, and we feel as well that kind of this straight shot through will allow students to get into their parking lot quicker, and high school parents to drop off and exit the site in a more structured manner. With doing that, we also added a bus entry lane right off from Glenowitz to kind of further separate the bus traffic from the parent and student traffic. It's something that we always like to highlight with school designs and making sure the flow is there. So you'll see a entry here for buses only. This will be a one-way in for buses only during all times. We do have some parking still in here, but this will be signed that it's only buses only during the pickup and drop-off periods of time. We also took a look at this parking and the access over here. Previously, we'd kind of had the same situation of this kind of snake through the parking lot over here as well. We kind of came up and through, but also after discussions and a lot of great input from the working group, we took a look at making this a little bit more straight, lined up this access here, to also allow a better connection with the bus loop and interaction with that. We revised this parking area to be a one-way circulation to kind of improve some of that flow. When people come into the site, they can easily look for a parking space and keep the flow of traffic moving. We also highlighted on this plan here the emergency access over to Riley Field. That's something that we still continue to watch and coordinate. So I think with that, I'll go to the next slide, which is the back of the site. There was a lot of time spent looking at the tennis courts and discussion about potentially adding some additional parking in this back area for the access to this middle school entry and also the entry to the Performing Arts Center and gym. We did many iterations with the help of the working group to try to look at what would be a better balance if there was one. We took a look at eliminating one tennis court, we looked at eliminating 3 tennis courts, looked at eliminating potentially all tennis courts, but the working group ultimately came to the decision that the town was promised the tennis courts, the town was promised the synthetic turf fields, and the amount of parking that could really squeeze in this area without really causing a negative effect to the tennis courts really wasn't worth the benefit. So after many iterations, we determined that keeping the 6 tennis courts in the locations that they were was really the right decision. Some minor striping improvements, but I think are important to note. In this loading dock area, one of the concerns of the working group was that if somebody was driving up here, they might just try to cheat the system and quickly loop around in the loading dock area and come back out, and just some confusion that might be caused there. So we've kind of worked with the working group to enhance this, the directional signs as well as some striping there. So if somebody does indeed think that they want to come into the loading dock area to try to drop off, they're now going to be directed to stop here and wait to get back into the flow of traffic. So kind of just some improvements on circulation and kind of the flow that we think will be helpful. The other thing that we took a look at was the high school drop-off. You'll now notice that it's mimicking the middle school drop-off where parents will come up and turn around. We've revised the parking configuration here just slightly to really enhance the synthetic turf and kind of redefine and refine those dimensions of synthetic turf to make them more usable and more functional for the purposes of the school. So the next slide is kind of focusing in on those synthetic turf fields. What you see here is we've kind of started to define the actual field sizes and limits, as well as the spectator space and benches that the athletes will be using. You can see on the further fields here, this was the field that got a little bit longer, as I mentioned before, just kind of shifting that parking down to gain a little bit more space here. So you can fit the youth football fields, soccer fields, boys and girls lacrosse on this side of the synthetic turf. This side is obviously a smaller field due to the constraints of the wetland and the building. But you can fit the soccer, girls lacrosse, and a practice field there. So there's many different options and iterations of how these fields can be set up. We've gone through a number of those options with the working group. But we feel like this is a good balance for the types of sports that will be played and kind of the different alternates that could be used. Another one that's not shown on here, just for visibility, is you still have the flexibility to put a field lengthwise through here if you wanted to. You know, that would give you a lot more space on either side for flexibility, and of course the whole area can still be used as practice for youth soccer. We're providing portable benches on this sideline. We provide space in the middle with the benches and also bleachers, and then again on this side as well. So you've got spectator areas on either side of the field, no matter which option you're really looking at. So I think those are the main site updates and kind of the enhancements that were discussed with the working group. Are there any questions on that before I get into permitting?
Is the sort of snack shack still?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Yep, it was previously located kind of in this area here. We have made a change to move that over to this edge here, you know, for a number of different reasons, for siting purposes, but also for kind of easy access if, you know, you're utilizing this field with the sidelines for spectators, but still keeping it centrally located in the facility. But
For the benefit of the people that haven't been able to attend the working group meetings, can you just talk about kind of some of the grade changes as well as the fencing heights?
Sure.
and some of those different variables?
Yep. So the school building is at elevation 139. This access road here is fairly flat, 2% pitch. We've got this retaining wall that stretches from this area all the way down to here. It's about a 2.5 foot retaining wall, kind of a seat wall, if you will. And then you'll step down to the field. So if you're sitting up here, you're kind of overlooking the field. The fields are relatively flat. They've got, you know, 0.5% pitch, so you'll look across the fields, and this will be fairly level as if you're looking at two fields side by side. And then this retaining wall in the rear varies in range. The highest point is right in this area as you get close to the wetlands, and that's about 10 to 12 feet in that area. And then obviously it tapers off to these areas, you know, 8, 6, 4 in this general direction. The fencing we're providing, we've got a 10-foot fence along the retaining wall area, and then a 4-foot fence along the rest of the perimeter to kind of keep balls inside, but kind of heighten that wall, the retaining wall, just understanding that. We want to
chain link fences? Or?
Yep, black vinyl chain link.
I think it's, if I can just make a comment, I think it's really important to understand that the amount of time that the working group put into this section in particular was significant and very important. And it turned out, as a result, this area, with all of the restrictions, with the wetlands across here, with the utilities, the setbacks, the trying to maximize the amount of turf area within this zone, the building location around the perimeter, the drive, all of those restrictions and dimensional requirements, the group collectively was able to discuss and implement a really nice complex in the back with bleachers and spectator seating along all three, either side of both fields, a full football field with goalposts, the required runoff area, multiple scoreboards, and it is the dimensional constraints there are there, and it's going to be a really nice playing area for multiple teams in multiple sports.
Carrie, could you just touch on, just to follow up on what Rich is saying? I think the last time the building committee may have seen this plan, there would have been a retaining wall between the parking lot and the synthetic turf field. If you could just talk a little bit about how the improvement and how now that's just a nice gentle transition down to the field.
You're talking this area
Yes.
here? Yep. Yep, so previously you might have seen a retaining wall kind of shown in this area. Right now we've got probably about a 1.5 foot grade difference between this parking lot spot and the synthetic turf field. And we're actually still massaging these grades here to kind of keep that a nice even transition over that space.
I just want to echo what Troy said, and what Rich was saying about the working group. We hashed this to death, and I apologize for, I was the instigator for part of it. But I think it was a real great exercise, because when we first looked at the first draft, these fields were pretty tight together, and we had some extra parking on the left side of the field, if you recall one of our prior site layouts. And we looked at it, we only had, 10 feet of out-of-bounds space and 20 to 25 feet between the two fields. And one of the things we were really big on was safety, because although we realize this is a school, it is also a public facility that is heavily used. I want to make it clear too, we didn't change the school building footprint. Nothing has changed there. We've been working outside that. That's been kind of the holy grail we didn't touch. But I think what we did, and thank you to Carrie and to AI3 and Mary for coming back with all sorts of reiterations. And this we thought was a safe playing field area. It has a little wider sideline space for everybody. Has room for bleachers that are not within that runoff space, so that a kid still can run out of bounds without hitting something. We even went so far as to move the light tower off the edge of the field and outside the retaining wall, so there's no chance that a kid could even go that far. And moving that parking lot an extra, whatever it was, 10 or 15 feet, allowed us, if someone was to be running lengthwise down the field, they still have runoff room. So it ended up working great, and we did not lose or go beyond our minimum requirement of parking spaces on site. We had to reconfigure the parking out front in other areas, so it was a lot of moving parts. The issue with the tennis courts was a concern because of one of the things that I voiced was, if you have a large crowd at the auditorium or in the gymnasium and then everyone kind of leaves when the event is over, most of our larger parking areas are out in the front of the building, on the side of the building, so people are going to have a pretty good walk to get there for those events. And the question was, well, should we forfeit the tennis courts? And the answer came after looking at it is no. You can't forfeit the tennis courts. It's too vital to the community. It was part of the original drawing. And in case of inclement weather, there would be an opportunity, the way we've designed this building, very nicely I might add, that the community could be allowed to go through the core of the building out to the front entrance of the building without going into any classroom areas. It'd be very segregated and controlled because of the way they laid this out. So I just want to thank the working committee, but mainly our professionals, for going through this. We spent a lot of time on safety in the playing field, safety crossing the streets, safety where the parking spaces were going to be, and we ended up really thinking out loud about the psychology of the parent driver who's dropping off their child and the student driver who's coming in to park. What are they really going to do when we build this? And that made us change, like, the bus entrance and trying to do some things that would make traffic slow down, but also not have a lot of curves where people would have to turn left and jog right. And we're very tight on space, but I think we came down to a pretty good resolution here. So again, thank you for all the time you put into it.
Right, if there are no other comments, we can come back to this, but I'll just give you a quick permitting update. I think last time I was in front of you, we talked about submitting to the town permits in April. We've been able to take a look at the design and, you know, with the help of the working group, kind of speed up that process a little bit. And we're scheduled to submit to the local boards in March. So the conservation will submit on the 17th of March. That will likely get us onto the first hearing in April. Zoning will be submitting on the 12th of March, and planning will be submitting on the 13th. We're still coordinating with the planning and zoning. At the initial phase, we were hoping to get a joint public meeting, so we're still coordinating those efforts to see exactly when that will happen, but that will likely be in April as well. The Mass DOT permit will be submitting probably the first week in March, and going through that review process with them.
Is that was the requests for modifications?
Right, on Route 18, yep,
Yes.
for the Mass DOT, yep.
What do you expect for feedback from Master DOT timeline, or is that kind of a wild card?
It's a little bit of a wild card. They have multiple design checkpoints. So we did have an initial meeting with them, just kind of briefly reviewing the scope. There were no red flags with them at that time. They were pretty helpful and kind of just talking us through what their thoughts were, but they didn't see any red flags with it. So it's probably a couple months. They've got multiple reviews, so it's like the first review will take about 30 days, and then they'll go back for a second one. But they do have a scheduled time frame for that.
And just to reiterate, this was our request to the state to put in a green turn arrow on Route 18, which would basically come on during the morning traffic or the afternoon traffic when school's in, school's out.
Yep.
But the state has the decision to make on that one.
That's correct.
It includes other striping and painting to improve flow. So people segregate themselves prior to getting to the traffic light, though, also.
Right, we'll do that on Glenwood's Way, right?
And then Lincoln,
There's some on Lincoln too.
I believe.
Yeah,
on
basically,
Lincoln.
the exit lane of Glenwood's Way would be a delineated left turn lane, and then the right lane would be straight or right turn lane.
Coming off of Lincoln Boulevard, would that have a left turn arrow also?
Not an arrow,
No.
but painting to
Segregated.
Right.
help people make their decision before they get to the light. So, you know, right now it's not.
So we're hopeful the state will see the benefit of the green arrow and implement that.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, they were pretty positive in our initial discussions, but, you know, like all permitting agencies, they're gonna need to review it, but no
And actually
initial.
something that could be implemented well before the building even gets open.
Yep.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
Great. Next item on the agenda, at the request of Sean Riley, is consideration of radiant heated entry sidewalks as a, I believe, an ad alternate. Would you like to discuss that, Mr. Riley?
Sure, I don't have to get up to it. Do you need me to get up there? All right. This was just, for those of you who aren't familiar with the public bidding part of the process, if a design element is not included in the big package, and it's either very difficult or impossible to add it later. And this is just a request on my part to put this in the list of ad alternates, which would only be accepted and adopted if essentially our bid came in substantially below our budget, which would be a great thing to happen, but there's no promise that that's gonna happen. But I'm asking that the radiant heated walkways would be included in this design so that if we were extremely lucky and had the ability to incorporate this into this project, that we would have the ability to decide at that time whether we'd want to do so or not. There are a couple other ad alternates that we've already decided to do, which would take precedence above this, such as new lighting on Glenwood's Way and the concession stand, things like that. That would not change. The pecking order doesn't change. But the radiant heat, for those of you familiar with it, and I passed out photos, we have it up at the town hall, we have it up at the library. And again, my concern here with the school is it is going to be one of our largest public buildings. If we were fortunate to have it either at the auditorium gymnasium entrances and/or the front entrances, or both, I'm not sure how it will be written up, at least we have it in the mix that if the opportunity arises, we could adopt it and accept it. I was on the police station building committee, and we tried to do it here, but we just did not have the funding to do it here. So I just want to consider putting it on the list for potential, even if it's a small potential, to add it to this project. I don't have a dollar figure yet. One of the local residents was getting us a dollar figure. He's an engineer. I know he's worked with Troy before and all. I don't think he got anything to you, Troy, did he?
No.
No. He was hoping to get it before tonight's meeting, and if we need to plug in that number or take a vote later, that's fine. I don't know what the process is, Mary, that you require or we require.
Sean, do you have a ballpark?
Depending on where you want it located, it's usually about $12 to $15 per square foot. Again, it can vary widely depending on how large the area is, and if you break it up into a lot of smaller areas, but a lot of times we'll use that for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, and just so you know, it's not electric. It feeds off the hot water that is in the heat system as it is, like at the town hall library. So it's actually hot water that goes through the pipes in the concrete walkways. And for example, the walkways at the gym and auditorium exits, which are on the left and right side of the buildings, those walkways are not very long. I mean, the doorway, the walk from the doorway to the sidewalk is, I don't know, what would you say, 15 to 20 feet?
Yeah.
15 to 20 feet long, so you can decide whether you want to have an 8-foot wide heated walkway. Same thing for the front, the middle school and the high school entrance. Part of it is covered, but that doesn't necessarily mean snow can't blow in there or whatever. And it only comes on by sensors that detect whether it's the temperature's below 36 degrees and whether there's precipitation. If it's not cold enough, it doesn't come on. If it's not raining or snowing, it doesn't come on. And it's basically buying the pumps and then paying for the tubing. So it's not a significant expense, but what it gives you is clear, safe passageways into your main entrances. And again, my concern is, and the weather outside is testament to it, if you have a basketball game or something going on in the auditorium, or just something going on at either one in the middle school or the high school, and the crowd leaves, you're asking the janitor who's on duty to shovel more than one doorway or walkway to get people at least out to the driveways where they then have to walk to their car. If the radiant heat was affordable because we had a low bid, then at least maybe the front walkways are clear, or the gym walkways are clear, or all 4 of them are clear. Well, obviously it'd be nice to have all 4 of them, but maybe the committee will at some point have to make a decision. We only have enough money to do front or gym, and we can decide at that point. But again, you can't even get to that unless you put it in the bid documents as an ad alternate.
Have you been saving this until we had a historic storm?
Yeah.
The timing helped. And the high school janitors and custodians are very much in favor of this because they've been shoveling a lot, as we all have been. But even at the town hall library, I think if you talk to anyone who works, one of the other things it does is because the walkways are clear and dry, you're not bringing in slush and snow and mud on your boots and on your shoes. So the carpets then last a lot longer, and there's just less interior maintenance. So there's a lot of perks. But again, it's not number 1 on our list of things to add to this building. Education's going to be first, and some other issues that I mentioned previously. But this is my request to get it on the list where we can plug it in.
That's a good idea. Then less, that you have to put in sand and salt down in those areas as well, so
Right.
that tracks into the building.
The other benefit of the radiant heating is that whether it's a concrete surface or asphalt, it won't be subject to freeze-thaw conditions, so the surface will last longer because it's heated, and it won't be subject to freeze-thaw and cracking. And again, like was mentioned, you wouldn't be using salt or de-icing chemicals on the concrete. So even though there is an initial cost to the system, the long-term benefit is the surface will last longer.
Also, if we're gonna do it during construction instead of coming back in afterwards.
Most
No
definitely.
question.
Sean, we may explore not just I don't know why you ended up with hydronic, but depending on where our piping locations are, we might want to also just explore a little bit doing electric, just in case there's a significant savings in doing electric over hydronic.
Yeah, the hydronic, the water-based water and glycol, it kind of lit in our minds because the mechanical room is very close to the western gym auditorium exit, which is then just across the building to the other exit. But then when we were having our site design discussions, there was a thought of, oh geez, maybe we should do the front doors because those will be utilized most often. And whether the committee or the designers think that one part or all of them should be electric, I'll leave it to the designers to look into that and look at the cost of that compared to the hydronics, both installation and operationally.
Anything for additional consideration from the professional staff?
Couple of questions. What's the process for add alternates, Mary? Is it?
So, under state statutes, you have to present your alternates prior to bid. And you are required to take them in the order in which they are presented in the bid document. We presently have add alternate number 1, being the synthetic fields, as was required by MSBA. Add alternate 2, the lighting on the synthetic field, thank you. Add alternate 3 was the lighting on Glenowitz Way. And add alternate 4 was the concession stand. So this would be add alternate 5, which would mean that we would have to have a bid come in at such a level that we could afford all of the first 4 add alternates and still be able to afford the full value of the 5th alternate. And that's if we decide that we don't need to include any alternates from this point on.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. If there are other things that come into play, does the whole lineup get reworked again, or?
We
is
would
it-
definitely review that with you because because of the fact that you have to go in the order of the alternates as they're presented in the bid documents. It's very important to have that discussion with the entire group so that we're ensuring that even if we do add or deducts, say you want to do add alternates and you also want to do deduct alternates for one reason or another, it again is in the order of all of those. So we need to have a strategy session to understand what is going to best benefit the town and where we are with our estimates, because it's very important to understand what we're buying for the building, what we're getting, and what we think is an opportunity for add alternates or deduct alternates on the project.
The synthetic fields has to be number 1, is that what you said?
Well, basically, the MSBA would not allow us to put it into the main bid of the project, so we would have that as alternate number 1 because it's the first, I think, in the choices of those alternates that we put together.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the concession stand one, the entire stand, or is that just getting utilities out there?
No, it was the entire concession stand at this point. Again, we've talked back and forth about whether we would just bring utilities out there or whether we would do, is it the foundations and
Utilities and slab are
Yeah, sorry.
part of the document.
Yeah, foundations and slab. It wasn't the full concession, because that was gonna go back to the user groups to see what they wanna do with regard to rebuilding it. So, I mean, it's all things that as we get closer to bid time, we'll need to review all of this and have, the group really give us a vote on how you wanna handle the, bid documents. And we can pursue it at this point moving forward and, determine where we are, at least cost-wise, to have an understanding of what we're talking about, we may be able or may not be able to afford.
We can't take a vote on the item because we don't have a quorum. I would be interested if there's a consensus amongst the committee that it makes sense for us to explore the costs, and then if we were to determine that we wanted to add it as an add alternate, then we would take a vote at that time, and once we have a quorum, if the committee voted to add it as an odd alternate, we would do so accordingly.
I just wanted to mention one other thing we talked about the electric system and the hydronic systems. In my experience, excavating walkways that had the electric systems, kind of troublesome because you usually rip the electric grid underneath, and if it's broken, I don't believe it can be spliced. It has to be rerun again. Whereas the hydronic system, if you puncture a piece of pipe, a section of pipe, can be repaired in it. So I know there's advantages of each, and depending on the design, we might have to go one way or the other.
Okay. All right, so we will request that the professional team continue researching that as an option, and then prior to going out to bid, if we do determine that the committee feels that it's appropriate to add it, we can have a vote at that time and add it as an add alternate to the project. Okay. Mary, could I ask you to provide a budget update, please?
Yes, we basically had, included in the packet that you got tonight is the updated budget. We had 2 invoices this month, one from AI3 and one from our office for services performed during the month of January. And that was basically to complete the design development documents, including a cost estimating, which the invoices for those cost estimates will be coming in next month because we finished that very late in the month. So at this point, based on all commitments and expenditures to date, we are tracking on or below budget.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. General business and items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance. I would just have, in light of the snow we received and watching the news and seeing that there were some, at least one school within the Commonwealth that's going to be closed for an extended period of time due to snow loads on the roof. I was just going to ask quickly if the professional team could touch on kind of our load bearing capacity and, you know, will it take Armageddon to close the school or what?
On the proposed future building?
On the proposed future building, yeah, you can't be held liable for the council.
Yeah, in 2012, was it 12? Just a few years ago, as a result of I think it was just after 2012, because in 2011, 2012 was a 100-inch snowfall year approximately in this area. And so during that same time period, the structural code was modified to reflect the need for additional snow loading capacity in Massachusetts. So since that point in time, any building that's been designed since then, including your new proposed middle high school, has to have significantly more capacity than your current building or any, quite frankly, any building that was designed prior to then. And it, just sort of in layman terms, it, depending on the exact location on the roof, it equates to the capacity to support about 6 to 8 feet of snow. So the new snow loading requirements are intended to create a building where you don't get in a panic situation of having to try to figure out whether you need to be removing snow from the roof or not. In fact, in areas of potential drifting snow, meaning if you have a change in roof heights where the wind may cause the snow to drift even deeper than that, the capacity has to be even greater than that. So it was a great improvement to the code requirement, and this new building would obviously comply with that.
I would add to that, though, that it would be very important as we move forward that the school department develop, and I'm sure they have something in hand now, but that they develop plans for seasonal snows like we're having this year. The impact to the structural loads is a consideration, but of important an impact is we have a lot of rooftop equipment, we have a lot of vents, we have a lot of intakes that are required for boilers and for hot water heaters, et cetera. So there will need to be a plan in place so that we're not burying these components. If we're running heating units, they require fresh air intake. If we're running a boiler, they require makeup air to make it run. In most of your homes, you get that makeup air through your chimney. But it's important that the maintenance or custodian staff has a very clear plan in place to be able to clear out those units. Because if we're getting 3 to 4 feet of snow against those units, they will not function properly and could cause some ill to the equipment if you don't do those practices.
So, because, I don't know when this is airing on, this conversation's timely. We're currently in the practice, for example, today, of being on roofs, checking roof drains, to make sure that the water that's melting is appropriately being discharged off of our roofs. And doing inspections, interior inspections, in terms of, fortunate enough that we contacted Marshall Adams today, who's the building inspector. We checked with him. We've been in contact today with the fire department in terms of those inspections in the attic spaces and checking the support structures. So that's as of today and as of the loads we currently have. And so we continue to watch the weather and hope for warm weather without rain, which adds quite a bit of load to these roofs. But there's no telling what's going to happen with that forecast. But in the current conditions, we continue to monitor them and do what Mary just described in terms of what we currently have in our buildings. So we certainly want to do that in the future with the new building.
Mary, that's the protocol that you would go through when you turn the building over, I think, with the maintenance stuff anyways. Is that not the case?
Yeah, it'll be part of the maintenance training with the staff, but it's important to note that it will need to get done. A lot of times, the main focus right now is snow loads and the impacts that they're having, but equally important, and Roger and I are seeing it at a school we've just recently finished, that they're having issues keeping up with the snow on the roof and clearing the equipment, and it's causing some impacts for them. And it's something that you should just keep in mind, because it's dangerous up there. No one really wants to be up on the roof, but it still needs to be cleared.
We borrowed a bucket truck from the fire department today to clear away the ice from the doorways that accumulates and the snow drifts over doorways, so that, because not only is the roof load a concern, not only the roof drains a concern, but just coming in and out of the building and not getting chunks of ice falling off of the roof are a concern too. And so one of the things that's, before the building opens each morning as the custodian gets there, they're checking all of those doorways, because we've noticed over the last 2 days, we clear them one night for entrance the next day, and the next day they're there again, because these icing conditions accumulate. As soon as you remove them, they start growing again over our doorways. So there's a list of things to be checking with the current conditions.
Are there any additional items for discussion that were not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance?
Anybody want to help learn how to run the new website? Because they changed the whole backbone and format of it, and I've got to meet with the guy. If there's anyone else who's interested in doing it, just let me know.
All right. And anything else for the good of the group?
Project manager kicks out.
All right, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
We're gonna schedule.
Do we need a second?
Do we need to schedule future meetings? So we want to, I guess we should have additional meetings.
There'll probably be more stuff to talk about.
That way we eventually scheduled it.
We have scheduled March 10th at 6 p.m. And I would suggest perhaps we wait on the April meeting until we get to March and understand how the permitting is going to go and how we're progressing with the 60% savings.
March 10th would be 6 o'clock again.
Here.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, so the next meeting will be scheduled for March 10th at 6 PM in the community room at the Abington Police Station. And we will continue to have working group meetings. Between now and then, we'll send out notice in advance. The next working group meeting
This Friday.
is this Friday, which would be Friday the 13th, February 13th. And those are at 7:30 a.m. at the North School Building, the administration offices.
So we have one this Friday?
Yes.
This Friday the 13th, and then we were not going to meet during school vacation week and meet the following Friday, which is the 27th.
So
That's, you know that already, that's definitely not meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Any additional business?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you,
Hearing
Mr.
none.
Davis, for videotaping this.
Have a good evening. Be safe. Oh.
Eleven.